Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. I'm Alistair Hicks, the curator, and those of you who were here earlier could have seen Marko working very hard in various different disguises, writing away on the elevators. I'm just going to explain a bit why I asked Marko to be in this exhibition. And then he, as revenge is the theme of the night, he can then come back and give, and hopefully we can have a discussion about doublethink and the different ways of thinking that artists do around the world. My particular interest in Marko, in a way, is that the exhibition starts with Russian artists, so Moscow conceptualism and the way that they started to think in different ways because they weren't allowed to communicate in the standard ways that we all assumed we'd been thinking for many, many generations. Now, Marko comes from Russia is the largest country in the world, and Marko lives in a country of 1.3 million that is just next door and was occupied by Russia for many years. So I always get the age wrong when you when you got independence. I think you were 27, was it?
I think I was around 27, yeah.
27.
Yeah.
So Marko was brought up in a Soviet-style education, etc., and but most of his working career has been thinking differently. And yet, the person who gave the title of this exhibition, Pavel Pepperstein, thinks in a very different way to Marko, and we've just done a double show together in Paris, and their work complements each other, but Pavel's thinking is much more indirect, and Marko is as direct as it gets at times. So, but you still have a different way of thinking. You're not straightforward Western. And this is, I think I'm going to try and get him to answer my own question, why I chose him. Now, I'm being very devious now. So, you didn't really have any relationship with the Russian artist. This is what first surprised me, because I would have thought you would have been aware of the Moscow conceptualists, and only really that you became aware at a later stage in not in your most influential time. So you were mainly thinking about Western artists and fellow Estonian artists, is that right?
I think you're absolutely correct. When I was studying, of course I didn't know anything about art when I grew up, and I grew up in a very small village, so I didn't have any connection with art whatsoever. And in the end of the Soviet era, when I became an art student, of course, then the first connections appeared, and I started to pay more attention what was going on in art and also in international scene. Yeah, I think it was I think in Estonia, what was very symptomatic that we had under the Soviet occupation for 40 years, and when Estonians were so against, or most of the occupied countries were against, but I think there was a big resistance to the Soviet occupation in the three Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania. And I think everything that came from the Russian side was really just absolutely no question, nobody was really interested in it. Also, when I was a student, through my course mate, I had some friends, kind of underground artists from St. Petersburg. So we visited St. Petersburg and we had wild parties with them. I was making tea, letting the hot water out of the St. Petersburg central heating system. And I was still alive, so I've had these experiences too, but not really like I was really more like kind of visiting and wondering what was going on, but I was not definitely influenced by Russian artists.
And was it more, do you think it was difficult to become an art student in the old regime? How did you go about becoming an artist in the old regime? Was it any different from how it is for young artists today?
Right now, definitely. It's funny, but true. Art was so super big thing during Soviet occupation, because art was the only way of resisting the system. So Estonian Art Academy was kind of like a little oasis where everybody want to have parties, and everybody want to go, and everybody want to study there, because once you're in there, then you're kind of like, you're allowed to do different things, and you're allowed to dress differently, you're allowed to talk different things and do kind of weird art. But the art was, of course, kind of like more like self-reflecting sort of stuff. We were not really aware of what was going on in a broader scene, and it was really difficult to become an art student because of that, because it was so super popular. There were students who made exams to become an art student for 6 or 7 years in a row. And in the end, they succeeded even, and kind of a strange. Now it's just like that.
Did it help if your family were good party members and things like that?
I don't think that it really helped. But what helped was that when you were sent, for Estonians it wasn't so, but from the other occupied republics and also Russia, it was kind of a certain amount of students Estonian Academy of Art had to accept. It was kind of like some sort of a, I don't know, plan. So it was difficult to get in because of half of the academy was already filled by sort of plan. Let's say so many students from Moldavia, so many students from Belarus, and so on. So it was difficult to get in.
In the beginning of the exhibition upstairs, the Russians that the Moscow conceptualists were outside. Sorry, is the system working? Yeah. That it was very. They were outside the system. So
yeah,
they were only artists to each other, but the state didn't accept them, and it was because of that that they created this sort of doublethink and a new way. Now, in your own Estonian system, where there are artists outside the system that you related to, or was it who were the artists within the Estonian system that you related to?
So there were, of course, kind of underground art in Estonia too, but I don't know why, again, but Estonia was kind of kept pretty loose from the regime. For example, our underground artists were not put in jail. Of course, they were taken to the interviews. KGB, of course, was following them, but they really didn't need to do this sort of double thinking that much than comparing to the artists in Moscow and St. Petersburg. So I think in Estonia they were more free, and they didn't really need to afraid of that much of repression. I don't know why it was, but probably because of Estonia had more connections with Finns, and you know, if you did terrible things there, then it went to international news in the end, because so many tourists visited from Finland, and I think the Soviet system was really very cleverly planned, so that they kept us kind of more like a little liberal country.
So did you ever think that you had to hide your own thinking from other people?
What do you mean exactly?
Well, did you think that you couldn't say what you wanted to because of the politics?
Okay.
How free did you feel as a young man?
When I became a student and I started to exhibit my works, I think then we could already say whatever you like. Because when I made these exams to become a student, then it was exactly that moment when you could already use kind of to show the national flag and kind of use these colors, 3 colors, which were completely forbidden, and you could have sent to Siberia because of using these 3 color combinations in your art.
Yeah.
But then it was already, because I'm a lucky, very lucky generations, so I didn't really need to do this thing when I became an artist.
So, you know, your work is currently on show in Paris with Pavel Pepperstein, who definitely has quite a different take on things. How do you feel your work relates to it? What was it like seeing the work, and what do you think were the big differences between your work and
also
his?
we are the same generation, so I think during the 90s when he was also actively showing, I think there was also time when there was no Soviet repression anymore. I think it was kind of different. I don't know when really he started to exhibit, maybe in the end of the 80s. But I think his work is, it's more like, he's using more kind of like the symbolic hidden language, sort of like, it doesn't say things out like black and white.
It's very difficult. Normally, I mean, the work upstairs is very straight compared to most of his work because
so it's going round.
Yes,
it's going round.
Almost a sort of nonsense. Rhymes, and he's a storyteller, and it's almost an accumulation. But you've never gone into that at all.
No, I never needed to do that. Because I always had. I never had a feeling that I need to use some hidden code or language, or I should not say what I really want to say. For me, it was more like my kind of fight was more like to be able to say things as directly as I can. And so nobody really cared.
But we have got upstairs The Alphabet of Lies, which is a series about all the lies that you've.
Lies have been kind of issue for me because I think we all know what does it mean kind of to do stupid small lies and then feel like, why on earth did I have to say these things, because I really didn't need to. I didn't really need to show myself better than I actually am. But this is our nature. We just try to, for example, when I speak with you, and if I don't really understand something, then my first reaction is like, for example, when you ask, did you understand what I said? I want to say, of course I did, although I didn't. So it's kind of like, this kind of feeling, like you don't want to say that you're stupid, so and then you start lying. And it's such a kind of thin line, and it's so hard. Or even if you go home, you've been away, I don't know, or let's say you come back home very late, you've been somewhere in a party, and you just kind of want to say exactly where you've been, then you start kind of going round and round. I think this is the same thing like in the Soviet time because of KGB, but now we are doing it just for more domestic reasons, or more to kind of show ourselves in a better way to other people, not to the regime.
Yes, so
I think it's basically the same thing,
But it's come from both sides. It's capitalism, communism that you've got. It's not. Another big theme of the exhibition upstairs, every single artist really is involved with the balance of image and text. And there was this Russian art critic, Boris Groys, who said that conceptualism is about the balance of image and text rather than the pursuit of pure thought and the Neoplatonic line. Now, your balance, I feel that you've always been interested in putting images and text together, or how did it happen initially? I mean, did you ever paint just pure pictures or make?
During my studies, of course, it wasn't that kind of conscious, even because we were doing what we were told to do. But already from the beginning, I had very long titles for my works. The people were always laughing that your title is longer than your work, or bigger than your work, whatever. So I must say that my ideas usually come to me like texts or sentences or words or something like that. Then I start illustrating them with the image. It's not that much like I'm interested in creating a super powerful image, but I'm interested in communicating something which I'm having in my mind. And I remember that moment when I was not using text that much, and at one point I felt like my work is not communicating enough for me. So I see that it's kind of like a dead end, you know. I'm making images, but I'm not sure if people really get it and if it's interesting for them. And then I started to use more and more text. First I started to do things like you have an image, and then you just write like a manual how to read this image. For example, on this image there are certain things, and I name these things under the image. Say this thing means that, and these things mean that. It was kind of more interesting for me to kind of double explain, or it was also kind of like explain one way and then explain it another way too.
From me coming from the sort of Anglo-Saxon world, I immediately started, when I first saw your work, I'm afraid, as you know, I found it funny.
Yeah, I know, everybody finds it funny, but it's okay.
So I started associating it in a way with some of the political cartoonists, like Jules Pfeiffer from America. But I know that's not where you came from at all. But you have used, I mean, you've done postcards, which must, by their very definition, you're expecting an instant hit, aren't you? So there must be an element of getting a hit from, or what was the origin of your postcards? Where did you first do the postcards? And
it was very incidentally. I was in residency in Paris some years ago, and I had a bunch of photos I had done, and I edited them, added some text bubbles, and I didn't really know what should I do with them.
So the images came first in this case?
Yes, but when I was taking these images, I was taking the images of two people having conversation. And my first plan was that I will later invent conversations between these two persons I'm photographing. Secretly behind their back, not asking for permission, but also not showing their face. So I'm taking pictures of couples sitting here and there in parks and kind of on wherever. And my idea was that I will create some conversations, fictionary conversations. But I wasn't thinking of postcards, but a friend came to my studio, and I showed these works to my friend, and he said that, okay, they look like postcards. Why don't you make postcards of these images? And yeah, I picked this idea from this guy, and I made postcards. It wasn't my idea. I got this idea from my friend, German artist. Maybe he was, yeah.
Now, you never seem to have had a barrier between what you do in life and what you do in art. What you've written upstairs is that your relationship with a girl didn't go, and she didn't like art, so it was revenge on the world.
Yeah, it's true.
Do you think you've got your revenge by now?
I think, yeah, we are Facebook friends, but she still doesn't like art, so I'm sometimes testing her sending some show info, and she doesn't really care.
Yeah. So do you think, I mean, because your main subject is your own family.
Basically, yeah.
And you're very rare in that as an artist. I mean, it's strange because lots and lots of writers use their family and the domestic situation as their subject matter.
Not that much in art.
But very few artists. Why do you think that is?
When I started to do that, it was really a very rational thinking. I'm not really, I don't really think thinking is such a good tool. I think feeling and sensing is way more efficient. But sometimes you need to use thinking too. And I remember thinking really critically when I picked a full-time job in Estonian Academy of Art as a Dean of Fine Arts, almost 10 years ago, more 10 years ago. And I suddenly felt like I'm totally super occupied, I don't have time for my own art anymore. And then it came to the conclusion that all the frustration I was suddenly having from that moment, that now I'm totally super occupied and I don't have time for my family, I don't have time for myself, now I need to do a job, full-time job, which I don't really like, but I'm doing it for money, and the money, I definitely need this money because we just took the bank loan to buy our home for 25 years. You know, you feel like you're totally trapped. You have painted yourself in a corner and you can get out of it the next 25 years. So I suddenly realized that this is the anxiety and all the pile of problems which were suddenly falling on me. I was thinking the only way to go on as an artist is to work with this pile of problems and anxiety, and I put it in my art, and I started to deal with these things and started to make works out of this helpless situation. So it was very like, it was more like a kind of rescue boat to stay alive for myself, because I didn't have space in my head to do anything else but just dealing my own life.
But you don't think of art as therapy?
Definitely, it's a therapy, yeah.
It was your own therapy
for
yourself?
I'm still doing it as a therapy, of course.
Yeah.
And I think that even saved my marriage and many things, because there have been times when our relationship with my wife was kind of in a kind of critical point, but because of my family was so much inside my art practice, so I really care of my art practice, because this is my only life. I want to do art. I want to exhibit. Then I think I was very happy to really have that kind of reason to keep on going both things, like my art practice and also my relationship, because they are so much like as one thing. And I think it definitely is a therapy, yeah. And I don't really find anything wrong in it. Also, it is very rare in Estonia. Nobody still doing it that much. And when I started 10 years ago, then I was the only one, and everybody was thinking that I've gone completely out of my mind, sharing all my kind of domestic problems and issues.
Yeah, I don't think there is anyone anywhere actually
yeah.
quite doing what you are.
So it's strange, yeah.
But it's interesting, there have been writers who've written about people close to them. There's a Spanish writer, for instance, who was Don at Cambridge, and he wrote about the fellow faculty members and all those people there, and he was fascinated. He did a novel 9 years afterwards, because people started imagining things. So a lot of the people who weren't actually in the novel thought they were major characters and were totally unconvinced. And indeed, the main book dealer in the town thought he was a major character, and he wasn't. So he actually made a whole story out of the different reactions of everyone. But when you're dealing with your family as characters, at times do they enjoy being in your... And like for instance, when your son suddenly realised that your paintings were quite valuable, and asked you about. You made a work about Porsches, didn't you?
How many paintings you should sell to buy a Porsche? And he was very good at math. He's very good at mathematics, much better than I am. He very quickly calculated. And why don't you sell all these paintings? Then we could have a Porsche. Because my classmate's family, or my classmate's father, has 2 Porsches because he's going to a very posh school, and so it was very difficult to explain why I'm not really selling all these 5 paintings at once.
So, what did your son feel about when he saw that work?
I don't know really, because one thing is that I of course explain all my works to my children, because even if they are not asking questions that much, but I'm saying that okay, this is about this and this is about that, and they always like to come to my studio, and we don't have any secrets and any problems, but I have a feeling that they are so used to what I do, they don't even see it anymore. They kind of see it as a normal life. Or my daughter, who is 16, she kind of like, her classmates are coming to my show and they laugh at my works, and they're taking it as something very, very normal.
And a lot of your work is about the inability to communicate, the lack of communication.
I think this is something that really interests me.
And so, I mean, the big sculpture and the film where you show your wife and you with paper bags on your head because
not to see each other's all the
bored
time.
of each other.
Yeah, bored of each other.
That must be quite difficult to live with in a. Or does do you think it feeds a relationship? I mean,
I think it rather feeds it. I think it rather feeds it. Yeah, because I must also say that my wife is the first sort of critique, and I'm always testing my ideas, which I'm not very certain. Certain ideas I'm super certain about. I never bother showing it to my wife or anybody. I just show it in the show. But certain ideas which I'm not very certain, then I'm always throwing them to my wife to see what I'm in the middle of something, what you think, and then I can read her reaction very well. So she's my first sort of testing kind of opportunity to show what my wife thinks. So she knows all my works and she knows why I'm doing it, and I think she's not looking at it as her. Even if we are sitting on the sofa, both having the paper bags, and the text says that behind us there is a text on a wall that wow, this is pretty nice, like that, after being married for 20 years. So because I was so bored of your face, and with these bags on, we can still carry on and go on for another 20 years without any problem. And the wife says that of course this is really nice, and I also like that because I was really tired of your face too. So something like kind of like a mutual understanding that to carry on and to go on, you need to do something, and the first thing you can do is just to put the paper bags on your head, and so you don't see each other that much. So she's not really taking it as a critique to our own family life. She's taking it as more like as a symbol of the problem in general. I think this is how I see it, because I'm not really. I don't want to really share my own life with people. I want to talk about things which I'm really concerned about. But I'm using my own family as an example, of course. And I've often asked that, why are you doing it? Then I'm asking, but whose family should I use then? Should I use somebody else's kids?
I'm not volunteering mine.
Yes, so nobody wants to be part of my art project. But my wife and my 2 children are kind of like, I don't know. They trust me. I trust them. It's easy to use them.
Yeah.
Just like.
But to slightly change the subject, you said that lack of communication interests you.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, I think a lot of artists, it's not what they want to communicate, it's the blockage inside them that is the motivating
something that
force. But it's for a lot, you know, people talk about writer's block, etc. But at the same time, there's another moment when that makes you do something against. It's like being presented with a blank page and you've just got to do.
I think I have the kind of my own sort of theory, which might not be right at all. And I think people who do art or visual art or music or whatever literature or whatever creative field they are operating, I believe that there must be a reason for that people find a way to do something creative or to invent something, their own worlds. And I think they invent things because of they feel kind of lack of communication. I remember when I was a kid, I was so much sort of, I don't know, there's probably the word for it. Is it some sort of, for example, at school when the teacher was asking me to tell the lesson, although I knew it, I was so much afraid of opening my mouth that I didn't say anything. And I got a bad mark, and after the class I had to go and kind of get all these things done, but I couldn't speak in public. I couldn't really tell anything kind of in front of the class, other pupil. So I was so much afraid of telling things and saying things out. And I think these moments probably lead you to invent some new sort of communication channel. Probably there are people who are more sensitive visually, they pick up some visual language. Those who are more verbally or musically sensitive, they start writing music or text. I believe that there must be something that is not really going very well, and then you invent a new method of speaking. For example, I feel way more free and I have more courage in telling things out through my art project rather than just go in front of you and start telling about my issues, you know, what I'm worried about or whatever.
But I think that's probably why your work has particular power, because you're using very everyday, mundane things in a way.
I don't have anything else to talk about.
No, but everybody can identify. We all have families.
Yes.
And this is why it is just amazing that that you are so on your own, because it is, everyone identifies. They're going around their lives and they think of the situation they've been in. They look at the videos of you chasing your children around
with
an axe and trying to kill them. Or so, but and then everyone identifies with it, and yet in their own worlds they have to deal with it. And I think that outpouring makes the appeal, really. But do you think you're set on talking about your family for life now?
No, I don't think so. It may
They'll
change.
get off eventually.
They can change, and I have times when I'm more interested in it. I have times when I'm not that much interested in it. For example, some of my recent works are more talking about something else, which is more like what is happening in the world right now, because you feel.
So you're trying to escape in a way.
I'm kind of trying to escape too, because you feel like you are kind of. You need to challenge yourself to look for something different. For maybe then you can come back again.
So in the Paris show, for instance, you really are addressing some very political situations, or what's happening to us on an everyday basis, and the bombing and the terrorists, and in Paris that you've made a sculpture of a bomb, and then you see in the distance a work that looks like a very pretty piece of wallpaper, and it's actually the bombs going off and there are lots of body parts floating all over. but you've done it decoratively.
Yeah.
So there's you apply the same view that you apply to your family to the world at large.
I'm afraid because I'm the same person and I have
sometimes.
Yeah, today I've been shark and bunny rabbit and a cow, but most of it I'm the same person, and I think I can't really escape from how I see things and how I want to communicate. I think I'm happy to communicate things in a way people really. I want to invite people to see my work. I don't want to scare them off. I don't want to make them run away from the gallery. I want to invite them to have a. It's a question of communication. I want to build a bridge with the audience, and I think this is pretty important to make your work kind of inviting at the first sight. Let's say you see something, you want to go near. It doesn't look dangerous. Doesn't look disgusting. It doesn't look like you don't want to go near. You want to go near, and then you may discover that the topic is probably pretty hard or serious, but that you already related to it. So it's kind of like I'm building I'm trying to build kind of sort of traps or something that people would step in, and then I have them and I can talk with them.
Right. Well, you do it very well.
Yeah.
I've got one more question before I open up to see whether other people can have got questions for you. One of the main points of this exhibition is trying to get the diversity of 34 different artists giving their own type of thinking. You are very much your own artist, but going around the exhibition, did you feel that you related? Are there any people that you felt close or triggered things off, or was it were you relieved that none of them were like you?
Yeah. No, I think what I've discovered just in recent years that I'm always reacting to text and image, and I'm always reacting to book things. I don't know why, because I'm not a reading person. I'm always having a problem because I'm too lazy reading, so I'm not reading at all, almost very, very little. But I like writing, and I like dealing with books as objects and as something which is like kind of very valuable, and they have some sort of very strong meaning to me. But I'm not using them as people are supposed to use books, kind of read them. So books are always kind of attractive to me, and the show is dealing so much with book issue or books as objects, or the different meanings of books. I like the sword books, which were like you can't really open them. The artist. That was really very strong for me. And the Pettibon, of course, which I already I already know from the show in Tallinn some years ago. So I think, although I don't really get exactly what he's talking about, because he's talking about so much about the American society, but I kind of like his nerve, the kind of nerve in the work. It's so strong, and it is kind of very the impulse is so strong. I could feel it.
Because when we did when Marko had his show at Kumu, Raymond also had the next door galleries, and so the exhibition was called Home and Away, and there were definite parallels.
Yeah. So it's kind of like I think text and image is always that talks to me. Yeah. Probably because this is my sort of thing too, and I'm always struggling with putting them together, and especially I know how difficult it is to make a gallery show with lots of text, because people are coming to the gallery and not really expecting to see too much of reading. They don't want to read in a gallery. They want to just see something. Yeah.
Actually, I feel very guilty because the whole exhibition is meant to be showing how there's a new balance between text and image, and that we're trying to escape from a society that's been 100% text-based in one sense, with our education, our legal systems, etc. But there's a hell of a lot to read when you go around that.
It's still a lot to
really
read.
Have to look at it all. you.